On a sticky Jacksonville evening, the street fair buzzed with laughter until Officer Travis Malone, a hulking white cop, bellowed at Patrice Coleman, a black woman in a crisp blazer, to move her sorry ass. She stared back unflinching and he spat in her face. Phones lit up, gasps echoed, but she wiped it off, whispered into her phone, and vanished. Later, Travis bragged at the precinct, blind to the chaos brewing. What had he just unleashed? Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's episode will flip everything you think you know. Travis swaggered into the Jacksonville precinct locker room, his boots thudding against the scuffed linoleum, a smirk tugging at his weathered face as he tossed his cap onto a bench. His shift had ended 15 minutes ago, and the buzz of the street fair still clung to him like the sweat soaking his collar. He leaned against a locker, popping the tab on a soda can, and let out a gravelly chuckle that bounced off the walls. "You should have seen it," he said to a cluster of younger officers peeling off their vests. "This chick at the fair, standing there like she owned the place, holding up the whole damn line. Told her to move her sorry ass, and when she gave me that look, I spit right in her face. Bam, taught her a lesson quick." The room erupted in snickers, a couple of guys nodding like they'd have done the same, their eyes glinting with that mix of admiration and unease Travis thrived on. He took a long swig, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, savoring the memory of her stunned silence, the way she'd just wiped it off and walked away. Weak, he thought. Another nobody trying to play tough. He had no clue her name was Patrice Coleman, or that his night was about to catch fire. Across town, in a 10th-floor hotel room overlooking the St. Johns River, Patrice sat on the edge of a stiff armchair, her navy blazer draped over the back, her fingers steady as she scrolled through her phone. The air conditioner hummed, battling the muggy heat seeping through the window, but her focus was razor-sharp. A grainy video flickered on the screen, time-stamped 7:32 p.m., just an hour ago. There she was, standing amid the fairs, chaos, balloons bobbing overhead, the crowd's chatter a dull roar until Travis's voice cut through like a chainsaw. "Move your sorry ass," he'd barked, and then the spit, a wet glob arcing through the air, splattering across her cheek. The camera wobbled as someone gasped, "Did he just—" And then it caught her response. A slow turn, a raised eyebrow, a wipe with her sleeve, and a quiet exit into the throng. She replayed it, her jaw tightening, not from shame, but from the cold fury coiling in her chest. She tapped the screen, checking the views. 10,000 already, climbing fast, comments flooding in. "Disgusting pig," one read. "That's our tax dollars at work," another snapped. A third, darker. "She deserved it, acting all high and mighty." Patrice's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was bigger, uglier, and she'd been waiting for a spark like this. She set the phone down and picked up another, a burner she'd grabbed from her suitcase, its black plastic cool against her palm. She dialed a number from memory. Her voice, low and clipped when the line clicked. "It's me. I need a file on an Officer Travis Malone, Jacksonville PD. Full history, every complaint, every slap on the wrist. By morning." The deputy on the other end, a gravel-voiced woman named Lena who'd worked with Patrice in Atlanta, didn't hesitate. "Got it, Chief. Anything else?" Patrice's eyes flicked back to the video, now at 12,000 views. "Yeah. Keep it quiet." She hung up, leaning back, her mind already mapping the battlefield. She'd arrived in Jacksonville 3 days ago, her appointment as police chief still under wraps until next week. A deliberate low profile to scout the lay of the land. Travis had just handed her a live grenade, and she wasn't about to let it sit there ticking. By 9 p.m. the precinct was half empty, fluorescent lights buzzing over rows of dented desks, the night shift shuffling in with yawns and coffee cups. Travis lingered, sprawled in a chair, regaling a rookie with a louder version of his triumph. "She didn't even fight back, just slunk off like a kicked dog," he said, tossing the empty soda can into a trash bin with a clang. The rookie, a wiry kid with acne scars, grinned nervously, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Travis didn't notice, too caught up in his own echo. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the storm brewing in its veins. Meanwhile, the video hit 15,000 views, shared across platforms like wildfire, hashtag sprouting. Justice for her, racist cop. A barista from the fair posted a follow-up clip, shaky footage of Travis shoving through the crowd post-spit, his badge glinting under string lights. "This guy's a menace," the caption read, and the retweets piled up, a digital roar Travis couldn't hear from his bubble. 30 miles south, in a cluttered studio stuffed with microphones and flickering monitors, Carl Vance hunched over a desk, his bald scalp gleaming under a desk lamp. He was 52, a former trucker turned shock jock, his voice a nasal growl that had clawed its way into Jacksonville's airwaves. His show, Vance Unleashed, thrived on outrage, and tonight he'd struck gold. He'd snagged the video from a listener's DM, watched it thrice, and grinned like a wolf spotting a lame deer. "Well, well," he muttered, cracking his knuckles. He hit record, the red light blinking, and leaned into the mic. "Listen up, Jacksonville. We've got a hero out there tonight, a cop who ain't afraid to put these uppity types in their place. Officer Travis Malone, folks, standing tall against the woke mob. This woman, prancing around like she's somebody, got what was coming. A little spit never hurt nobody, but it sure shut her up." He cackled, the sound grating through the speakers, and kept rolling. "The left's gonna cry, but real Americans get it. Travis is us fighting back. Call in. Tell me I'm right." He uploaded the segment to his site, and by 10 p.m. it was live, streaming to his 10,000 loyal listeners, a match tossed into dry grass. Back at the hotel, Patrice's phone buzzed, a text from Maya Torres, a friend and journalist she'd tipped off earlier. "Video's at 20,000. You okay?" Patrice typed back, "Fine. Watch Vance's show tonight." She switched tabs, pulling up Carl's stream, and caught the tail end of his rant. "Travis Malone, a name you won't forget," Carl bellowed, and she felt the heat rise in her throat. She refreshed the video's page. 30,000 views now, the comments a war zone. "Fire him," clashed with "good for him," and worse, slurs she'd heard too many times before. She closed her eyes, breathing deep, picturing Travis's smug face. He thought he'd won a petty scrap, a flex of his badge's weight. He didn't know she'd seen his file already, emailed from Lena at 11:58 p.m., a PDF bursting with dirt. 15 years on the force, 37 complaints, excessive force, racial profiling, a chokehold that nearly killed a black teen in 2012, all swept under the rug by a precinct that prized loyalty over law. She scrolled the list, her pulse steady but fierce, each line fuel for the fire she'd light tomorrow. Carl's broadcast hit the streets like a thunderclap. By midnight, his site crashed from traffic, but clips of his praise for Travis ricocheted across social media, doubling the video's reach to 60,000 views. A gas station clerk tweeted, "Heard Vance, that cop's a legend," while a nurse countered, "This is why we can't trust police." The city split, a fault line cracking open, and Travis slept through it all, sprawled on his couch, a half-empty beer cradled in his lap. At the hotel, Patrice stood at the window, the river below a dark ribbon cutting through the lights. She'd come to Jacksonville to fix a broken department, not to star in a viral circus. But Travis had made it personal, and Carl had made it public. She slipped the burner phone into her pocket, the file glowing on her laptop screen, and murmured to herself, "You've got no idea what's coming." The night stretched on, the video climbing to 75,000, a fuse sizzling toward dawn. The sun barely crested Jacksonville's skyline when Patrice Coleman strode into City Hall, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a metronome counting down to war. It was 6:45 a.m., the air still thick with last night's humidity, and the building hummed with the early stirrings of bureaucrats clutching coffee mugs. She'd swapped her blazer for a charcoal suit that hugged her frame, her badge tucked in her pocket, a silent promise of the power she'd wield in 5 days when her tenure as police chief officially began. The viral video had hit 90,000 views overnight, a digital wildfire she'd fanned with Travis Malone's file burning a hole in her briefcase. She didn't knock when she reached the mayor's office, just pushed the door open, catching Harold Grayson mid-bite into a jelly. "Don't—" his tie askew, his balding head gleaming under fluorescent lights. "Who the hell are you?" he sputtered, crumbs tumbling onto his desk, but she didn't flinch. She slapped her badge down, the metal clinking against the wood, and locked eyes with him. "Patrice Coleman, Your new police chief. Suspend officer. Travis Malone. Now. Her voice was a blade, sharp and unyielding, slicing through his confusion. Grayson's jowls quivered, his watery blue eyes darting to the badge, then back to her. A man caught in headlights he didn't see coming. Grayson stammered, wiping his sticky fingers on a napkin, his mind racing to piece together why this woman, a stranger with a glare that could melt steel, was barking orders before he'd even finished breakfast. Look, Miss Coleman, I don't know what this is about, he started, but she cut him off, sliding her phone across the desk. The video paused on Travis's spit arcing toward her face. 90,000 people do. Suspend him, or I'll make sure every news outlet in Florida knows you're soft on racist cops. Her tone didn't waver, each word a brick stacking a wall he couldn't climb. Grayson swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a buoy in a storm, and grabbed his desk phone, punching numbers with trembling fingers. By 7:15 the order was out. Travis Malone suspended without pay, effective immediately. Patrice nodded once, a curt acknowledgement, and left without another word, the door swinging shut behind her. Outside the morning sun blazed, and she allowed herself a flicker of satisfaction, a taste of the justice she'd come to deliver. Could this be the first crack in the dam? By 9 a.m., the news broke online, a local blog screaming, "Racist cop suspended after viral video." Patrice's supporters erupted, flooding comment sections with fist emojis and finally chants, the view count ticking past 100,000. She sat in her hotel room, sipping black coffee, watching the tide turn. A text from Maya. Torres buzzed her phone. "You're a legend already." Patrice smirked, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd landed a solid blow. Travis, meanwhile, woke to a barrage of voicemails, his suspension notice delivered by a stony-faced sergeant who didn't meet his eyes. He roared, hurling his phone across his cluttered living room, the screen cracking against a wall plastered with hunting trophies. Suspended? For what? Spitting on some nobody? He bellowed to no one, his voice hoarse with disbelief. He cracked open a beer, the aluminum cold against his palm, and chugged it, pacing like a caged bear, his mind spinning with rage. Who did this? How dare they? He didn't know Patrice's name, didn't care, but the sting of losing his badge, even temporarily, gnawed at him like a splinter under a nail. Across town, Carl Vance smelled blood in the water. His studio was a sauna, the AC busted, but he didn't care. Hunched over his mic, sweat beading on his brow as he watched the suspension news scroll on his laptop. He'd lost his sight to traffic last night, but his backup stream was live, and his listeners were ravenous. "They've gone and done it," he snarled into the mic, his voice a gravelly whip cracking through the airwaves. "Suspended our boy Travis Malone for standing up to the woke brigade. This is an attack, folks. A lynching by the PC police. We won't stand for it." He slammed his fist on the desk, the thud echoing, and kept going. "Meet me at the precinct, noon sharp. Bring your flags, your guts, bring it all." The stream cut to static as his followers roared back, phone lines lighting up with calls he didn't have time to take. By 11:30, a crowd swelled outside. The Jacksonville PD, 200-strong Confederate flags snapping in the breeze, voices chanting Travis's name like a war cry. What kind of city cheered a thug like him? Patrice caught wind of the protest from a news alert, the live feed showing Carl at the front, megaphone in hand, his bald head sunburned red as he screamed, "Reinstate Travis or burn it down." She stood at her hotel window, the river below, glinting like molten glass, and felt the first tremor of doubt. She'd won the suspension, sure, but this was a beast she hadn't tamed. She dialed Lena, her deputy, her voice steady despite the pulse hammering in her ears. "Get me." Eyes on that crowd, names, faces, anything. Lena grunted assent, and Patrice hung up, her mind ticking through moves and counter-moves. She'd expected pushback, but not this fast, not this loud. She slipped on her blazer, ready to head out, when a crash shattered her focus. A brick smashed. Through her window, glass spraying across the carpet, a jagged hole gaping where the pain had been. She ducked, instinct kicking in, and crawled to the debris, snatching the note taped to the rock, scrawled in black marker. "Go back where you came from." Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the realization that this wasn't just Travis anymore. Who else was pulling strings? The brick lay heavy in her hand, a crude missile that turned her small victory sour. She stood, brushing glass from her knees, and stared at the jagged skyline beyond the broken window. The protest roared on, Carl's voice a distant buzz, the crowd swelling to 300, their flags a sea of defiance. Online, the video hit 120,000 views, the suspension fueling both sides. Justice served clashed with Travis is a victim. She'd thought she'd struck first, a clean hit to start her reign, but now the ground shifted beneath her. The note crinkled in her fist, a promise of worse to come, and she knew this was no fluke. Someone had her in their sights, and they weren't done. She grabbed her phone, the file on Travis still open, and scrolled his list of allies, names she'd soon know too well. Had she underestimated this city's rot? Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Patrice should have seen this. Coming or number 2 if Travis deserves what's next. Smash that like button if you're rooting for her fight, and hit subscribe because the chaos is just getting started. What happens when a Chiefs' first win lights a match under a powder keg? The morning sun scorched Jacksonville's streets, baking the asphalt into a shimmering haze. But inside the precinct, Travis Malone felt a chill as he stormed through the double doors, his lawyer trailing like a shadow. It was 8:15 a.m., barely 24 hours since his suspension, and his bloodshot eyes gleamed with a mix of fury and triumph. Carl Vance's protest had swelled to 400 overnight, a snarling mob that camped outside City Hall, their chants rattling. Windows until Harold Grayson cracked. Travis clutched a reinstatement letter, ink still fresh, signed by the mayor after a frantic call from his lawyer, a wiry man named Ed Kessler with a penchant for loopholes. Racial bias against a veteran officer, Ed had argued, spinning. The suspension as a knee-jerk overreaction to unverified footage. Grayson, sweating through his suit, caved by dawn, citing a procedural glitch. No formal hearing had been held. Now Travis barged into the locker room, slamming the letter onto a table, his voice booming over the hum of flickering lights. Back in business, boys. Told you they couldn't keep me down. The younger cops swapped uneasy glances, a few muttering congratulations, but the air thickened with something sour, a stench of defiance that clung to him like smoke. Patrice arrived at her new office at 9 sharp, a corner suite on the precinct's 3rd floor, her name already etched on a brass plaque beside the door. She'd spent the night taping cardboard over her hotel's shattered window, the brick's note tucked into her briefcase like a battle scar. The room smelled of stale coffee and dust, but she barely noticed, her focus snagging on the chaos. Awaiting her. The desk was a wreck, papers strewn like confetti, drawers yanked open, and across the polished wood someone had carved N-word bitch in jagged letters, the knife marks deep enough to splinter the grain. Her stomach twisted, not from shock but from the raw, familiar venom of it, a hatred so bold it didn't bother hiding. She ran her fingers over the grooves, her nails catching on the rough edges, and felt the weight of the fight she'd chosen. This wasn't just Travis anymore. This was a system baring its teeth. She snapped a photo with her phone, evidence for later, and dialed Lena, her deputy's voice crackling through the speaker. Audit the precinct. Every officer Travis has ever worked with. I want names by noon. Lena didn't blink. On it, Chief. Patrice hung up, her pulse steady but fierce, ready to root out the rot one name at a time. Outside, the city buzzed with the news of Travis's return, the video now at 150,000 views, a digital beast feeding on itself. Carl Vance's stream looped clips of the protest, his nasal growl crowing victory. We did it, folks. Travis is back because real Americans fought. Social media split wider, a chasm of rage and disbelief. This is bullshit, one user posted, racking up thousands of likes, while another countered, good. She's the problem, not him. Patrice's supporters dwindled under the onslaught, drowned by Carl's army of trolls. She stepped out to grab coffee from a vending machine down the hall, her mind churning, when a rookie jogged up, his face pale. Chief, you need to see this. He led her to the parking lot where her SUV sat crumpled, the driver's side smashed inward, glass glittering on the pavement like fallen stars. A squad car idled nearby, 2 officers leaning against it, smirking as they watched her approach. "It looks like a prank gone wrong," one said, his voice dripping with mock pity, while the other chuckled, kicking a shard of windshield with his boot. "Kids these days, huh?" Patrice's eyes narrowed, her fists clenching at her sides. But she kept her voice ice-cold. "File a report, now." They shrugged, sauntering off, leaving her staring at the wreckage. The prank hit her like a sucker punch, a step beyond the brick, a warning etched in twisted metal. She called a tow truck, her breath fogging in the morning heat, and snapped more photos, the dented hood glaring back at her like a taunt. Back inside, Lena's email pinged, a list of 12 officers tied to Travis. Their records a laundry list of warnings and winks. She forwarded it to Maya Torres, the journalist, with a note, "Dig deeper." By noon, the precinct buzzed with whispers. Travis's reinstatement a spark in dry grass. He swaggered through the halls, his badge gleaming, barking orders at rookies who scurried to obey. He didn't know Patrice had seen the desk, the car, didn't know she was already plotting his next fall. But Carl Vance did. From his sweltering studio, he watched the protest disband, his listeners scattering back to their lives, and decided to twist the knife. He hit record, his voice a venomous hiss. "That woman, whoever she is, set Travis up. Framed him with that video, crying victim to steal his job. She's the racist, folks, and we've got proof." He uploaded a blurry still from the fair. Patrice's face circled in red, captioned, "The real threat to Jacksonville." The lie took root. A petition to fire the mystery woman launching online, 5,000 signatures in hours. Patrice caught the petition on her phone as she sat in her trashed office, the words blurring into a haze of absurdity. 5,000. People, strangers, wanted her gone for a spit she didn't throw, a fight she didn't start. She refreshed the page, watching the number climb to 6,000, Carl's followers amplifying his smear with glee. "She's a plant," one comment read. "Probably not even from here," another spat. The video hit 170,000 views, the narrative flipping, her dignity shredded by a man who'd never met her eyes. She stood, pacing the room, the carved slur on her desk, a mirror to the hate swelling outside. The car crash replayed. In her mind, the officer's smirks, the brick scrawl, and now this, a city turning on her before she'd even begun. She grabbed her briefcase, the audit list glowing on her screen, and headed for the stairs, her steps quickening with purpose. She'd wanted to start slow, assess the lay of the land, but Travis and Carl had forced her hand. This wasn't a skirmish anymore. It was a siege. By 3 p.m., the precinct parking lot swarmed with reporters, tipped off by the petition's surge, their cameras trained on the building's glass doors. Travis posed for a snapshot, grinning like a prize fighter, his lawyer at his side spinning tales of unfair persecution. "Officer Malone's a scapegoat," Ed Kessler told a mic, his voice smooth as oil. "This is about politics, not justice." Inside, Patrice watched from her window, the SUV's wreckage still cordoned off below, a monument to the morning's malice. She dialed Grayson, her tone flat but unyielding. "Reinstatement's a mistake. Fix it, or I go public with the audit." He sputtered, his voice a whine through the speaker. "I can't, not with Vance's crowd, they'll riot." She hung up, her jaw tight, knowing he'd buckle under pressure again. The petition hit 7,000, Carl's lie now gospel too. A chunk of the city, and she felt the walls closing in. She'd come to lead, to heal, but they'd turned her into prey. The desk's scars stared back at her, the air thick with the scent of spilled coffee and defiance, and she knew the next blow was coming, heavier, sharper, a storm she couldn't outrun. Patrice Coleman stood in her vandalized office, the late afternoon sun slanting through the blinds, casting jagged shadows across the desk's carved slur. It was 4 p.m., the air heavy with the tang of spilled coffee and the faint hum of the precinct below. But her mind was a steel trap snapping shut on a plan. The petition to fire her had ballooned to 8,000 signatures, Carl Vance's lie festering online. The video now at 200,000 views, a monster she couldn't ignore. Her SUV's wreckage still sat in the lot, a twisted trophy of yesterday's prank, and Travis Malone's swagger echoed through the halls. His reinstatement a slap she refused to take lying down. She grabbed her phone, her thumb hovering over Maya Torres's number, the journalist's name a lifeline in this swamp of hate. She hit call, her voice low and urgent, when Maya picked up. "I've got something for you. Travis's file, 15. Years of dirt, complaints, cover-ups, the works, run it tonight." Maya sucked in a breath, her excitement crackling through the line. "You sure, Patrice? This'll blow up." Patrice's lips curled, not a smile but a grimace of resolve. "That's the point." She emailed the PDF, the audit list attached, and leaned back, the chair creaking under her weight, waiting for the explosion. By 6 p.m., Maya's article hit the web, a sledgehammer titled "Jacksonville Cops' Brutal Past Exposed, Travis Malone's Reign of Terror." The piece was a gut punch, detailing 37 complaints. A black teen choked unconscious in 2012, a pregnant woman shoved to the ground in 2015, a litany of slurs and fists buried by a precinct that looked the other way. Maya's prose was fire, each sentence stoking outrage, and the file's scans, grainy but damning, flashed across screens citywide. Social media erupted, the video surging to 250,000 views as hashtags flipped. From "to reinstate Travis" to "ye fire Malone." Protests sparked outside the precinct, 200 strong, not Carl's flag-waving goons, but a mix of black residents, students, and mothers, their signs screaming, "No more!" Patrice watched from her window, the crowd's chants vibrating. Through the glass, a roar that drowned out the petition's noise. She felt the tide shift, a rush of power surging through her veins, and dialed Lena. "Prep a press release." "Malone's done." Lena chuckled, a rare sound. "You're a force, Chief." Patrice hung up, her chest tight with something close to hope. Had she finally turned the corner? Travis caught the article mid-beer at a dive bar on the edge of town. The TV above the counter flashing Maya's headline, his mugshot plastered beside it. The bottle slipped from his hand, shattering on the sticky floor, amber liquid pooling around his boots as the bar went quiet, every eye swiveling to him. "What the hell is this?" he growled, snatching his phone, the screen lighting up with notifications. Texts from buddies, a missed call from Ed Kessler, his lawyer, and a flood of hate from strangers. "You're a disgrace," one read. "Rot in jail," another spat. He bolted outside, the humid air slapping his face, and dialed Carl, his voice a snarl. "They've got my file, fix this." Carl, holed up in his studio, barked back, "Stay calm, we'll spin it." But Travis wasn't calm. He kicked a trash can, metal clanging down the alley, his world tilting as the protests swelled to 300. Their voices a tidal wave crashing over his fragile triumph. Patrice seized the moment, striding into that bar at 8 p.m., the same one Travis haunted, her suit crisp despite the day's grind. The room hushed as she spotted him slumped, in a corner booth, his eyes glassy, a fresh beer trembling in his grip. She slid into the seat across from him, her presence a thunderclap in the dim light, and leaned forward, her voice a razor. "You're done, Malone. That file's just the start. Walk away or I'll bury you." Travis blinked, his brain sluggish, from booze and shock, then sneered, his lip curling like a wounded dog's. "You don't scare me, lady. You're nothing." She stood, towering over him, her shadow swallowing his bravado. "Keep telling yourself that." She left, the door slamming behind her, the bar's patrons whispering as Travis stared into his drink, the article's words searing his skull. Outside, the protests hit 400, a sea of fury that felt like her army, and she thought for a fleeting second she'd won. Could one story really end him? The night deepened, the city pulsing with unrest until 11 p.m. brought a hammer blow. Sirens wailed as a SWAT team smashed through Patrice's apartment door, her temporary rental 3 blocks from the hotel, the lock splintering under a battering ram. She wasn't there, still at the precinct, but her neighbor's frantic call jolted her awake from a catnap on her office couch. "They're tearing your place apart," the old man rasped, and Patrice raced over, arriving to a scene of chaos, furniture overturned, books ripped from shelves, her clothes strewn across the floor. The SWAT leader, a barrel-chested man with a buzz cut, smirked as she flashed her badge. "Anonymous tip, Chief, drugs, gotta check it out." They found nothing, not a speck, but the damage was done. Reporters swarmed, tipped off by someone, cameras catching the mess, and by midnight headlines screamed, "New chief under investigation." Carl Vance pounced, his podcast live despite the hour, his voice a gleeful cackle. "See, she's the crook," framed Travis, now hiding her own. Filth. The protests faltered, the crowd thinning to 200. Confusion rippling as Patrice stood in her gutted apartment, the air thick with dust and betrayal. She clenched her fists, staring at the wreckage, the SWAT team's boot prints smudging. Her hardwood floors, a violation deeper than the car crash, more personal than the brick. Her phone buzzed, Maya's voice tight. "They're spinning it fast, Patrice. You okay?" She nodded, though Maya couldn't see, her throat raw. "I'll fix this." She hung up, piecing it together. Travis's allies, spooked by the exposé, had pulled strings, a desperate counterpunch to her leak. The video hit 300,000 views, but the narrative twisted, her triumph souring as Carl's lie took hold. She grabbed a broom, sweeping glass from a shattered frame, her niece's photo staring up through the shards, and felt the weight of the fight shift. She'd struck hard, thought she'd won, but they'd hit back harder, turning her weapon into their shield. The precinct loomed in her mind, a nest of vipers she'd underestimated, and she knew the next move had to be bigger, bolder, or she'd lose everything she'd come to build. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Patrice's leak was worth the risk, or number 2 if Travis's crew crossed a line with that raid. Hit like if you're stunned by this twist, and tap subscribe because the stakes are skyrocketing. Who's pulling the strings behind this SWAT ambush, and what's Patrice got up her sleeve to fight back? Patrice Coleman stood in the wreckage of her apartment, the dawn light filtering through cracked blinds, illuminating the chaos left by the SWAT raid. It was 6 a.m., the air sharp with the scent of torn paper and splintered wood, but her focus was ironclad. Her phone pressed to her ear as she paced past overturned chairs. The video had surged to 350,000 views overnight, Carl Vance's smear twisting her exposé into a boomerang, but she'd spent the pre-dawn hours digging. Security footage from the building's lobby, emailed by a jittery landlord, showed no anonymous tipster, just a squad car idling outside at 10:50 p.m. minutes before the raid. She forwarded it to Maya Torres with a terse note, "Proof it's a setup, run it." By 7, Maya's follow-up hit, a blistering piece titled, "Chief Targeted SWAT Raid Exposed as Lie," the grainy video embedded, showing the cops' smirks as they rolled up unprovoked. Social media flipped again, the hashtag Justice for Patrice trending, the raid stench turning public fury back toward Travis's crew. She felt a spark of control flicker to life, her jaw tight with resolve as she dialed Harold Grayson. "Tekani," Mayer answered on the third ring, his voice groggy, a man dragged from sleep by a storm he couldn't dodge. "What now, Coleman?" he grumbled, but she didn't let him breathe. "Your SWAT team trashed my place on a fake tip. Mayer's got the tape and it's live. Apologize publicly or I'll sue the city into next year." Grayson sputtered, his excuses drowning in the rustle of sheets, but by 8:30 he stood on the precinct steps, cameras flashing, his tie crooked as he mumbled, "We regret the incident and will investigate." Patrice watched from her office, the carved slur on her desk a silent taunt, and nodded once, a predator scenting. "Blood?" She called Lena next, her voice a whip. "Suspend 3 of Travis's buddies from the audit list now." Lena delivered by 9, paperwork filed, badges yanked, officers Reed, Callahan and Diaz, all with rap sheets tied to Travis's dirt. The precinct buzzed with shock, whispers snaking through the halls, and Patrice leaned back, the chair groaning. Under her weight, tasting victory again. Had she finally wrestled the beast? Travis heard the news at 10, sprawled on his couch, a hangover pulsing behind his eyes, the TV blaring Mayer's latest hit piece. His phone lit up with texts from Reed. "Suspended, man, she's coming for us." He hurled a beer can at the screen, glass shattering, his roar rattling the thin walls of his duplex. "That bitch!" he bellowed, pacing the stained carpet, his badge heavy in his pocket, a lifeline he'd clawed back only to see his crew gutted. He dialed Carl Vance, his voice a snarl. "She's taking us apart. Do something!" Carl, sweating in his studio, the AC still dead, growled back, "I'm on it. Stay low." Travis didn't stay low. He grabbed his keys, stormed out, and drove to City Hall, his truck screeching into a spot as a council meeting hummed inside, a dozen suits debating budgets under fluorescent glare. He barged in at 11, Carl at his side, the room freezing as he jabbed a finger at the council. "She's a black power grab ruining good cops. You gonna let her?" His voice boomed, spit flecking his lips, and Carl chimed in, "She's the real threat." The council, a mix of pinched faces and nervous glances, squirmed under the weight of Travis's glare, and the mob outside, now 50 strong, Carl's listeners waving signs, "Stop the witch hunt!" Patrice wasn't there. She'd stayed at the precinct, reviewing the audit. But the news hit her phone at 11:30, a live stream showing Travis's tirade, the crowd swelling to 75. Her stomach sank, not from fear but from the realization that her suspensions had lit a fuse. The council caved by noon, a shaky vote freezing her authority until a review of her actions. Grayson's signature scrawled on the order, his cowardice, a neon sign. She slammed her fist on the desk, the slur's grooves biting her knuckles, and called Lena. "They've grounded me. Get me everything on that council." Lena's voice tightened. "This is war, Chief." Patrice hung up, her pulse hammering, the taste of victory souring as the system flexed its claws. She'd thought she'd struck deep, but they'd parried, and the next blow was already falling. That night at 10:15, the air in Jacksonville thickened with smoke, a bitter tang cutting through the humidity. Patrice's brother, Jamal, owned a barbershop on the west side, a squat brick building with a neon open sign that flickered in the dark. He'd locked up at 9, heading home to his wife and kids, leaving the place quiet, its chairs lined up like sentinels. At 10:20, a pickup truck rolled up, 3 figures in hoods spilling out, their faces shadowed as they splashed gasoline across the walls, the liquid glinting under streetlights. A match flared, and flames roared to life, swallowing the shop in a hungry orange blaze. Glass popping, metal twisting, the sign melting into a puddle of sparks. Neighbors screamed, phones dialing 911, but the cops were slow, arriving. At 10:45, their sirens a distant wail as the building crumbled. Patrice got the call at 11, Jamal's voice shaking through tears. "They burned it, Trish. Everything's gone." She raced over, her sedan screeching to a halt, the heat blasting her face as she stared at the ruin, firefighters battling a blaze too fierce to tame. She found Jamal by the curb, his hands buried in his face, his shoulders heaving as ash rained down. "Masked guys chanting slurs," a witness stammered, an old woman clutching a robe, her eyes wide with terror. "Said it was for her." Patrice's blood ran cold, the words a knife twisting in her gut, linking the fire to her fight. She hugged Jamal, his sobs soaking her shirt, and whispered, "I'll fix this." But the promise felt hollow, the flames a towering rebuke to her suspensions, a strike more brutal than the raid, hitting her family where it hurt most. Cops milled around, their faces blank, one muttering, "Probably insurance fraud." His smirk a dagger she couldn't dodge. She snapped photos of the wreckage, her hands trembling, and called Maya. "Jamal's shop's gone, torched. Link it to Travis's crew." Maya's voice cracked. "Jesus, Patrice, I'm on it." The video hit 400,000 views by midnight, the arson trending. But Carl's podcast fired back, "She's staging it for sympathy." The city split wider, her win a pyre of loss. Patrice stood amid the smouldering rubble, the hair choking with soot, her brother's dream reduced to charred beams and melted scissors. The council's freeze replayed in her mind, a shackle she'd underestimated, and now this, a personal wound deeper than any desk slur or car crash. She'd cleared her name, taken out 3 of Travis's allies, thought she'd regained the upper hand, but the system struck back, ruthless and unyielding, turning her triumph to ash. She kicked a singed chair, the clang echoing in the night, and felt the weight of eyes watching, waiting for her next move. The precinct loomed in her thoughts, a fortress of foes she'd barely scratched, and she knew this was no longer about one cop or one file. It was a war, and they'd drawn first blood. She wiped her eyes, the sting of smoke and grief blurring her vision, and vowed to hit harder, even as the flames mocked her resolve. Patrice Coleman stood in the dim glow of a Jacksonville church basement, the air thick with the scent of old hymnals and brewing coffee. Her voice a steady drumbeat, cutting through the murmur of 50 community leaders. It was 7 p.m., the day after Jamal's barbershop burned, the ashes still warm in her memory as she faced the crowd. Pastors, activists, bar owners, their faces etched with exhaustion and defiance. She'd called them here, her authority frozen by the council, her brother's livelihood torched by hate, and now she needed an army. "They think they've silenced me," she said, her hands gripping the edge of a folding table, her suit rumpled from a sleepless night. "Burned my family's dreams, locked me out, but I'm not done. We march on City Hall tomorrow, 500 strong, and force them to listen." Her eyes blazed, meeting each gaze, and the room erupted, fists, pounding tables, voices shouting yes. Pastor Evans, a wiry man with graying temples, stood first. "We're with you, Chief. This ends now." By 8 the plan was set. Dawn, downtown, a show of power they couldn't ignore. The next morning at 6:30, the sun crept over the St. John's River, painting the sky a bruised orange as Patrice led the march, 500 souls strong, their footsteps a thunderous pulse against the pavement. Signs bobbed above the crowd. "Justice for Jamal! End the freeze!" The air crackled with chants, a rhythm of rage and hope, and Patrice walked at the front, her chin high, her brother Jamal beside her, his eyes red but fierce. They hit City Hall by 7, the building's glass facade reflecting their numbers, a tide Harold Grayson couldn't dodge. Reporters swarmed, cameras rolling, and the council peeked from windows, their faces pale as the crowd swelled to 600, words spreading fast. By 8, Grayson emerged, his voice quaking over a megaphone. "We'll lift the freeze, Chief!" "Coleman's back!" the marchers roared, Patrice's chest swelling with a fragile triumph, her hand squeezing Jamal's. The video hit 450,000 views, Maya's arson piece trending, and she thought maybe she'd clawed back control. Could this be the turning point? Travis Malone watched the march from a bar TV, the screen flickering in the dim light, his knuckles white around a whiskey glass. It was 9 a.m., the precinct a ghost town with his allies suspended, his badge a hollow prize as Patrice's victory played out. He'd slept 3 hours, Carl Vance's latest podcast looping in his ears. She's staging a takeover. The bar was empty save for a grizzled bartender who didn't look up, and Travis's rage boiled over, the glass shattering in his grip, blood trickling down his palm. He stormed out, the morning heat slamming him, and drove to the precinct, his truck screeching into the lot. He found a news crew lingering, mics hot, and ambushed them at 9:30, his uniform wrinkled, his voice a bellow. "She's a liar," he shouted, shoving past a reporter, and spat on the ground, the glob. "Caught on live TV," a grotesque echo of the fair. "She's ruining us and you're all blind." The clip exploded online, 500,000 views by noon, and Grayson, spooked, called an emergency meeting, firing Travis on the spot, his badge yanked for good. Patrice heard the news at 1 p.m., standing in her office, the slur-carved desk a relic of her fight. Lena burst in, breathless. "He's out, Chief. Grayson canned him." She nodded, a tight smile breaking through, the march's echo still ringing in her ears. The precinct hummed with unease, officers avoiding her gaze, but she felt the shift, a crack in the wall she'd hammered since day one. She called Maya, her voice steady. "Travis is gone. Push it hard." Maya's piece hit at 2. "Racist." Cop fired after second spit, the live clip looping. The city's outrage peaking at 600,000 views. Protests swelled again. Not Carl's mob, but her people. 800 now, their chants a balm to her battered spirit. She sat, exhaling, the weight lifting for a moment, thinking it was over. Travis was done, his venom spent, his allies gutted. She'd won, hadn't she? The phone rang at 3, Jamal's voice calm. "Picking up Keisha from school, we're good." She smiled, a real one, and hung up, the day's heat fading into a rare stillness. That stillness shattered at 4:15 when Jamal's call came again, his voice a jagged scream. "They took her, Trish." Keisha's gone. Patrice's heart stopped, the phone slipping as she bolted upright, the room spinning. He sobbed. Through the line, piecing it together. He'd parked at the school, stepped inside to grab Keisha, her 10-year-old frame usually bouncing toward him, but she never came. A teacher saw a van peel out, a man in a hood snatching her, a note left. On the curb, resign or she's next. Patrice raced to the school, her sedan weaving through traffic, arriving at 4:30 to find Jamal crumpled on the sidewalk, cops milling uselessly, their radios crackling with indifference. She snatched the note, her hands shaking. The scrawl, a dagger. Travis's doing, or Carl's, or both, a retaliation so cruel it dwarfed the arson. "Find her!" she barked at the officers, her voice a whip, but they shrugged, one muttering, "Kids run off sometimes." She called Lena, her words a hiss. Every camera, every lead, now. The video hit 650,000 views, the firing drowned by whispers of Keisha's fate. Patrice stood by Jamal, his tears soaking the pavement, her niece's school bag abandoned nearby, its pink straps a silent scream. The march, the firing, all her gains crumbled under this blow, a personal wound slicing deeper than any flame. She'd rallied a city, toppled Travis, thought she'd won, but they'd struck her core, a move so vile it rewrote the rules. She scanned the street, eyes burning, the cops' apathy a wall she couldn't breach. Maya arrived, her camera rolling, voice trembling. "Patrice, what's the plan?" She didn't answer, her mind racing, the note crumpled in her fist. This wasn't just war, it was a slaughter, and they'd taken her blood. She'd fought with files, with crowds, but now it was life or death. The precinct loomed in her thoughts, a den of snakes she'd barely scratched, and she knew this was there. Endgame, a strike to break her. She hugged Jamal, whispering, "I'll get her back." Her voice steeled through the grief and turned to the fight she couldn't lose. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Patrice's rally pushed them too far, or number 2, if Travis's firing justifies this payback. Smash like if this twist has you reeling, and hit subscribe because the clock's ticking on Keisha. What's Patrice willing to risk to save her niece, and who's behind this ruthless strike? Patrice Coleman stood on the school's curb, the late afternoon sun dipping low, casting long shadows over Keisha's abandoned pink school bag. It was 4:45 p.m., the air thick with the hum of distant traffic, and Jamal's stifled sobs, his hands clutching his face as cops dawdled nearby, their radios buzzing with static. The note, "Resign or she's next," burned in her pocket, a venomous ultimatum that turned her niece's kidnapping into a guillotine over her fight. She'd called Maya Torres at 4:35, her voice a razor through the panic. Jamal's, "Daughter's gone, tip came from Carl's crew, track it." Maya, already on scene, nodded, her camera down, eyes sharp. Got a lead. Warehouse off Duval abandoned, tied to Vance's old trucking days. Patrice didn't wait for confirmation. She grabbed Jamal, shoving him into her sedan, and peeled out, tires screeching, the precinct's apathy a fading blur. By 5, she hit the warehouse district, a maze of rusting steel and cracked concrete, her heart pounding as she spotted a battered van parked crookedly near a sagging building, its windows dark. She killed the engine, motioning Jamal to stay put, his eyes wild with fear but trusting her steel resolve. She slipped out, her boots silent on the gravel, and crept to the warehouse's side door, its hinges groaning as she eased it open. Inside, the air stank of oil and rot, dim light filtering through broken skylights. And there, in the center, Keisha sat bound to a chair, her small frame trembling, duct tape over her mouth. 2 figures loomed nearby, hoods up, one pacing with a crowbar, the other scrolling a phone, their voices low but smug. "Carl says she'll quit by dawn, the B." Crowbar man grunted, and Patrice's blood boiled. Her niece's muffled whimpers a call to war. She scanned the room, spotting a rusted pipe by the wall, and moved like a shadow, snatching it up. Her breath steady despite the rage clawing her chest. She lunged, swinging hard, the pipe cracking the phone guy's skull, dropping him with a thud. The crowbar man spun, swinging wild, but she ducked, slamming the pipe into his knee, then his jaw sending him sprawling. Blood pooling on the filthy floor. Patrice ripped the tape off Keisha's mouth, her niece's sobs breaking free as she untied the ropes, her small arms wrapping around her aunt's neck. "I knew you'd come," Keisha whispered, and Patrice hugged her tight, tears stinging her eyes as she dragged her to the van. Jamal leapt out, scooping Keisha up, his relief a choked cry, and they piled into the sedan, peeling away as sirens finally wailed in the distance, too late to claim credit. Back at the precinct by 6, Patrice stormed in, Keisha safe with Jamal at home, and called Maya. "Live stream this. Carl's goons took her. I've got proof." Maya set up in her office, the camera rolling as Patrice held up the note, her voice a thunderclap. "This is what they do. Kidnap kids to silence me. Carl Vance orchestrated it, and I'll prove." Taustu, the stream hit 10,000 views in minutes, the video soaring to 700,000, outrage flooding online as "Arrest Vance" trended. She felt a surge of triumph, her niece's face fueling her fire, and thought she'd landed a killing blow. Travis Malone, jobless and festering, watched the stream from a motel room, the TV flickering with Patrice's face, his fists clenched, so tight his nails drew blood. It was 7 p.m., his firing still raw, the bar spit replaying in his mind, a humiliation he couldn't shake. He'd called Carl an hour ago, begging for a counter, but now Patrice had Keisha back, and Carl's name was Mud. He stumbled to the precinct at 8, his breath sour with whiskey, and groveled at her office door, his voice a slurred plea. "Chief, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know about the kid. Let me off, please." Patrice stared him down, her eyes ice, the slur-carved desk between them a monument to his hate. "You're nothing to me now," she said, her tone flat, and waved him out, the door slamming as he shuffled away, head bowed. The stream hit 20,000 views, Carl's radio station cutting his show mid-broadcast, a panicked suspension, as sponsors fled. She leaned back, the chair creaking, believing she'd snapped their spine. Was this the end of their reign? The illusion shattered at 8:30, when a blast rocked the precinct lobby. A deafening roar that shook the building, glass exploding inward, screams piercing the night. Patrice bolted from her chair, the live stream cutting to static, and raced downstairs, her boots crunching shattered tiles as smoke billowed thick and black. 2 officers lay dead, their bodies mangled by the bomb, blood pooling under flickering lights, a dozen more staggering, coughing, their faces ash-streaked. She grabbed a rookie, his eyes wild, and barked, "What happened?" He stammered, "Package, front desk, just blew." She spotted a scrap of paper in the rubble, singed but legible. "This is for Travis." Her stomach dropped, the words, a gut punch linking the blast to her war, but twisted to frame her leadership as the spark. Sirens wailed outside, fire trucks rolling in, and reporters swarmed, the video hitting 750,000 views as "Precinct Bombed" trended, Carl's voice already on a rogue stream. "She brought this on us." The lobby smoldered, a war zone she'd walked into, and she knew her rescue had triggered this. A strike so lethal it dwarfed the kidnapping. Patrice stood amid the chaos, the air choking with ash and grief, her hands trembling as she helped a bleeding officer to a stretcher. The stream's echo faded, her triumph over Carl and Travis buried under this carnage, a retaliation that turned her victory to dust. She'd saved Keisha, humiliated Travis, thought she'd won, but they'd hit back with death, pinning it on her resolve. The note crinkled in her pocket, a twin to the bomb's message, and she saw the pattern. Every win she clawed, they escalated, ruthless and unyielding. She scanned the lobby, medics rushing past, the dead officers' badges glinting in the wreckage, and felt the weight of eyes, cops, reporters, a city judging her. The precinct, her supposed fortress, was a trap, and this was their checkmate, a blow to break her will. She straightened, wiping soot from her face, and vowed to fight on, even as the flames mocked her, a pyre of her fleeting hope. Patrice Coleman stood in the precinct lobby's wreckage, the acrid smoke still curling through the air at 9 p.m., her boots crunching glass as medics hauled stretchers past. The bomb's toll, 2 dead officers, 12 injured, hung heavy. The singed note, "This is for Travis," a dagger in her hand. The video had hit 800,000 views, the blast trending as a city reeled, but she didn't flinch. She'd called Lena at 8:40, her voice a steel thread through the chaos. Forensics on the bomb now, tie it to Carl's crew. Lena delivered by 10. A report emailed hot. Residue matched accelerants from Jamal's barbershop fire. Fingerprints lifted from the package linking to a known Vance listener, a wiry ex-con named Bobby Tate. Patrice stormed the evidence room, the air cool and sterile, and matched the prints herself, her hands steady as she bagged the proof. By 10:30, she led a raid on Tate's dive bar hideout, 5 officers kicking in the door, guns drawn, hauling him and 4 cronies out in cuffs, their protests drowned by sirens. She stared Tate down, his bloodshot eyes defiant, and hissed, "You're done." The arrests hit the news at 11, Maya Torres breaking it live outside the precinct, her camera catching Patrice in the background, soot-streaked but unbowed. "Chief Coleman links bombing to Vance followers," the headline screamed. The forensic report leaked, the city erupting as the video soared to 850,000 views. Protests swelled again. Not Carl's mob, but hers. 500 strong by midnight, chanting "Justice now" outside City Hall. Patrice stood at her office window, the slur-carved desk a silent witness, and watched the crowd, their signs a forest of fury. "Arrest Carl. End the hate," she called Harold Grayson at 12:15, her tone a blade. "I've got Tate, bombs on Vance, reinforce my authority, or this city burns." Grayson, his voice a whine through the line, muttered, Okay, you're back." She hung up, pushing a reform bill to the council via email. Mandatory training, oversight boards, her chest tight with a flicker of control. Travis was gone, hiding in shadows, and now Carl's crew was cracking. Had she finally seized the reins? The city applauded by dawn, the arrests trending, the video hitting 900,000 views as Chief Coleman surged, her resolve, a beacon to some, a threat to others. She sat in her office at 6 a.m., sipping lukewarm coffee, the reform bill's draft glowing on her screen, believing she'd turned the tide. Carl Vance, however, wasn't finished. Out on a rogue podcast. At 7, his studio a makeshift bunker after his station's suspension, he leaned into the mic, his voice a venomous rasp. "She's a dictator. Those arrests, lies. She bombed her own precinct to frame us." His words ignited his faithful 1,000 listeners by 8, their rage boiling over as he screamed, "Storm her house! End this now!" By 9, a mob formed, 1,000 strong, not just flags but torches. Molotovs clutched in fists, marching from the riverfront to Patrice's rental, a modest 2-story she'd moved into after the hotel. She was at the precinct briefing Lena. When Jamal called at 9:15, his voice a shriek. "They're here, Trish, fire!" Patrice raced home, her sedan weaving through traffic, arriving at 9:30 to a nightmare, flames licking the walls, windows shattering. The mob roaring as Molotovs arced through the air, glass bottles bursting into fireballs. She leapt out, her lungs burning with smoke, and sprinted to the back, kicking in a door as the crowd chanted, "Burn her out!" Inside, she grabbed a fire extinguisher, spraying foam at the kitchen blaze, her heart hammering as she searched for escape. The mob swelled to 1,200, their voices a wall of hate, and she slipped out the rear, coughing, her suit singed, the house a pyre she couldn't save. Sirens wailed, too late again, and she stumbled to a neighbor's yard, dialing Maya. "They torched my place, live it." Maya's stream hit at 10, the video rocketing to 950,000 views, but Carl's lie held sway, half, the city cheering the flames. Grayson called at 10:15, his voice a tremor. "You're a liability, Coleman. Badges revoked. Public safety." She froze, the phone slipping, her world crumbling as the fire roared. She stood in the neighbor's grass, the heat blasting her face, watching her home collapse, beams snapping, memories of Keisha's drawings and Jamal's visits swallowed by the blaze. The precinct buzzed in her mind, a fortress she'd fought. To claim, now a trap that spat her out. She'd pinned the bomb, arrested 5, thought she'd won, but Carl's mob struck harder, 1,000 torches to her one voice, and Grayson's betrayal was the killing blow. Her badge, her shield, gone, the reform bill a ghost on her screen as the crowd dispersed, their laughter echoing. She grabbed her phone, the arson live stream at 20,000 views, and heard Carl's cackle through a bystander's radio. "She's finished." The video hit 1 million, a milestone of her ruin, and she sank to her knees, the grass damp under her. the fight slipping through her fingers. They'd taken her niece, her home, her power, each blow fiercer than the last, and she wondered if she'd misjudged the beast entirely. Patrice rose, wiping ash from her eyes, her sedan a lone survivor parked blocks away, the mob's roar fading into the night. She'd saved Keisha, broken Carl's crew, but this, a house razed, a badge stripped, was a defeat she couldn't outrun. The precinct loomed in her thoughts, a den of snakes now laughing, and she knew Travis lurked somewhere, his shadow stretching over this chaos. She'd been a chief, a warrior, but now she was a fugitive in her own war, the city split, her allies dwindling. She clutched her phone, Maya's voice buzzing through. "Patrice, where are you?" She didn't answer, her mind racing, the next move a flicker in the dark. They'd burned her out, but she wasn't ash yet, and this wasn't over. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Patrice's arrests provoked this mob too much, or number 2 if Grayson's betrayal was the real gut punch. Hit like if this fire's got you shook, and tap subscribe because her fight's far from done. What's a chief without a badge do when the city turns, and who's waiting in the wings to strike next? Patrice Coleman crouched in the back seat of Maya Torres's beat-up hatchback, the night air seeping through a cracked window, her singed suit reeking of smoke from her torched home. It was 11 p.m., the city's pulse a distant hum as they parked in a shadowed alley 5 blocks from the precinct, her badge a memory stripped by Grayson's cowardice. The video had hit 1,050,000 views, the mob's fire trending, but she wasn't broken. She'd called Maya at 10:30, her voice a low growl. "We're hacking Carl's podcast. I've got proof he paid for the bomb." Maya, her eyes glinting with adrenaline, had rigged a laptop in the car, her fingers flying over keys as she breached Carl's rogue stream, a backdoor left from a source in his old station. By 11:15, they'd spliced in audio. Carl's voice recorded from a burner call Patrice had traced, bragging, "Tate's bomb cost me $5,000, but it shut her up." They hit play at 11:30, the podcast cutting mid-rant. Carl's confession blasting to his 1,000 listeners, a digital dagger that turned his flock against him. The fallout was instant, the video surging to 1,100,000 views as after Carl Vance exposed trended, listeners flooding comments with traitor and liar. Patrice watched the numbers climb, her breath fogging the window, and dialed Lena from a burner. "Fed's on Carl now, he's done." Lena, holed up at a safe house, made the call, and by midnight, sirens wailed as agents raided Carl's bunker. Studio, his bald head gleaming under floodlights as they cuffed him, his screams muffled by the slam of a van door. The news broke at 12:15. Vance arrested for precinct bombing, Maya's stream hitting 50,000 live viewers, the city roaring as Carl's empire crumbled. Patrice felt a spark flare in her chest, an ember of power she'd thought lost, but she wasn't done. She slipped into City Hall at 1 a.m. using a janitor's key Maya had swiped, and found Grayson in his office, hunched over a whiskey bottle, his tie a noose around his neck. She loomed over him, her shadow swallowing the desk, and pressed her phone to his ear, Carl's confession looping. "Reinstate me, or this goes wider," she said, her voice a blade. He nodded, hands shaking, and signed the order by 1:30, her badge restored on camera, Maya filming it all. The stream hit 100,000 views by 2 a.m., the reinstatement trending, crowds gathering outside City Hall, not Carl's mob, but hers, 300 strong, cheering as she emerged, her suit tattered, but her stance unbroken. The video rocketed to 1,200,000, chief back surging, and she stood on the steps, the river glinting behind her, feeling the city shift under her feet. Grayson slunk away, his resignation a whisper in the wind, and she called Lena at 2:15, her tone firm. "Round up Travis's last allies. We're cleaning house." The precinct buzzed with her return by 3, officers saluting stiffly, fear in their eyes as she strode through, her authority a hammer they couldn't dodge. She sat in her office, the slur-carved desk a trophy now, and exhaled, the weight lifting, her fight reborn. Carl was gone, Grayson broken, and Travis a ghost. She'd won, hadn't she? The city's pulse thrummed with her name, a chant of victory she could taste, a moment of light in the dark. That light dimmed at 4 a.m., when a scream shattered the stillness, a call from a pastor blasting through her phone. "Chief, they've got the church." She bolted upright, the voice frantic. Travis Malone, unhinged and armed, had stormed a black church on the west side, 20 congregants trapped inside, their Wednesday prayer meeting a hostage scene. She raced over, arriving at 4:15, her sedan skidding to a halt as floodlights bathed the building, its stained glass glinting like blood. Travis stood at the door, a shotgun in hand, his eyes wild, a militia of 10 behind him, ex-cops, and Vance loyalists in tactical vests, their faces twisted with hate. He'd rigged a live stream, his phone propped on a pew, broadcasting to a growing audience, 5,000 views in minutes, as he bellowed, "She resigns or they die." The video hit 1,300,000, the church's steeple a stark silhouette against the dawn, and Patrice stepped out, her badge gleaming, the crowd swelling to 500, their gasps a chorus of dread. He spotted her, his grin feral, and leveled the gun. "You thought you'd win, huh? Watch this." She froze, the barrel's glint a death knell, the congregants' muffled cries seeping through the walls. Jamal called at 4:20, his voice a sob. "Keisha's in there, Trish. She went with friends." Her heart sank, her niece's face flashing, the kidnapping's echo now a nightmare reborn. She grabbed a bullhorn from a cop, her voice booming over the chaos. "Travis, let them go. This is between us." He laughed, a jagged sound, and fired a warning shot into the sky, the crack splitting the air, the stream hitting 10,000. Views as the militia fanned out, sealing the exits. She called Lena, her words a hiss. "Snipers now, no mistakes." The precinct scrambled, but the clock ticked. Keisha's life a thread in Travis's grip, and Patrice knew this was no bluff. He'd lost everything, job, allies, pride, and now he'd burn it all to take her down. The crowd grew to 700, their phones filming, the video at 1,400,000, a city holding its breath. Patrice stood 50 feet. From the church, the bullhorn heavy in her hand. Her eyes locked on Travis, his militia a wall of menace. She'd hacked Carl, reclaimed her badge, thought she'd crushed them, but this, a church 20 souls Keisha, was a strike beyond bombs, a terror so raw it shook her core. The precinct loomed in her mind, a fortress she'd fought to hold. Now a distant echo as Travis's livestream taunted her, his voice a venomous chant, "She dies or they do." She'd gone underground, struck back, won the city's roar, but they'd escalated to this, a final gambit to break her. She dropped the bullhorn, her fists clenching, and stepped closer. The dawn's first light glinting off her badge, a vow to end this, whatever the cost. The standoff stretched, a wire ready to snap, and she knew one wrong move would bury them all. Patrice Coleman stood 50 feet from the church, the dawn sky bleeding pink over Jacksonville, her badge a faint gleam against her soot-streaked suit as Travis Malone's shotgun glinted in the floodlights. It was 4:30 a.m., the air thick, with the tang of gunpowder from his warning shot, the crowd swelling to 800, their gasps a low hum behind police tape. Inside, 20 hostages, including Keisha, whimpered through the walls. Travis's militia of 10 sealing the exits, their live stream hitting 15,000 views, his voice a ragged snarl, "She resigns or they die." Patrice's heart thudded, Keisha's name a silent scream in her skull, but her face was stone as she raised her hands, stepping closer, her boots crunching gravel. "Travis," she called, her voice steady, cutting through the chaos. "Let them go, take me instead." The crowd hushed, phones trembling in hands, the video surging to 1,500,000, a city frozen as he grinned, his eyes wild with a manic glee she hadn't seen at the fair. Travis lowered the shotgun an inch, his militia shifting, their vests bristling with ammo as he barked into the stream. "You hear that? She's giving up!" He waved her forward, the barrel, twitching, and she moved, each step a gamble, her mind racing with Lena's snipers still minutes out. She reached 30 feet, close enough to see sweat beading on his brow, the stink of whiskey wafting from him, and stopped, her hands still up. "Release them, Travis. You've got me. That's what you want, right?" He laughed, a jagged sound, and nodded to a goon who shoved the church door open, the hostages stumbling out, 19 shadows in the dawn, their cries piercing the air. Keisha burst last, her small frame bolting toward Jamal in the crowd. his arm scooping her up as Patrice's chest unclenched, a breath she'd held since 4:20. Travis grabbed her arm, yanking her inside, the door slamming, the stream, hitting 20,000 views as he roared, "Now it's just us, Chief." Inside, the church smelled of wax and fear, pews overturned, hymnals scattered like fallen leaves. Travis shoved her to the altar, his shotgun pressed to her back, the militia circling, their boots thudding on the hardwood. The livestream phone glowed on a pew, Maya's feed syncing it outside, the video at 1,600,000, a nation watching as he paced, his voice a venomous chant. "You took everything. My job. My life. Now you pay." Patrice stood still, her eyes darting, spotting a brass candlestick by the pulpit, its weight a silent promise. She'd saved Keisha, freed the rest, but this was her crucible, a trap she'd walked into to end him. She turned, slow, facing him, her voice low. "You're finished, Travis. No badge, no allies, just a drunk with a gun." His face twisted, rage flaring, and he swung the shotgun's butt at her head. A clumsy arc she dodged, lunging for the candlestick, her fingers wrapping around its cold metal. The fight erupted, a blur of fury in the church's dim light. Patrice, swinging the candlestick hard, cracking Travis's wrist, the shotgun clattering to the floor. He roared, tackling her, his fists hammering her ribs, but she rolled, slamming the brass into his temple, blood spraying as he staggered. The militia froze, stunned, their leader crumbling, and she kicked the gun away, pinning him with her knee, her breath ragged as she twisted his arm, his screams echoing off the rafters. "Stay down!" she hissed, wrenching harder, and he went, limp, his fight bleeding out on the hardwood. She stood, chest heaving, and waved at the camera. "He's done." Her voice a raw triumph, as Maya's feed hit 1,700,000, the crowd outside erupting, 1,000 strong. Now their cheers shaking the earth. Cops stormed in at 4:50, cuffing Travis and his crew, the live stream cutting as he was dragged out, his head lolling, a broken man at last. Patrice emerged at 5, the dawn brightening, her suit torn, blood streaking her face, but her stance unbroken as the crowd roared, "Chief! Chief!" Jamal rushed her, Keisha in his arms. Their hugs a lifeline as the video hit 1,800,000, Travis down trending, a city hailing her as a hero. She called Lena at 5:15, her voice hoarse. "Push Grayson out." "He's next." Lena relayed it, and by 6 Grayson resigned. A press release citing personal reasons, his office empty as the council caved, her reform bill greenlit. She stood on the church steps, the crowd at 1200, their phones filming, and felt the weight lift. Travis's defeat, a crown she'd forged in blood and brass. The precinct buzzed with her return, officers saluting, fear replaced by joy, and she thought finally she'd won. The video hit 1,900,000, her name a chant across Jacksonville, a victory so sweet it drowned the arson, the bomb, the mob. Was this her unbreakable moment? That triumph splintered at 6:30, when a crack split the air. A sniper's bullet grazing her shoulder, the sting sharp as she stumbled, blood blooming through her sleeve. The crowd screamed, scattering, phones dropping as cops drew guns. Scanning rooftops, the video surging to 2 million, chaos trending as Chief shot. Flashed online. She clutched her arm, ducking behind a squad car, her pulse racing as a voice crackled through her radio, low and cold. "Next time, headshot." Lena rushed over, her face pale, shouting, "Get her out!" as medics swarmed, bandaging her on the spot. The wound shallow but the threat deep. The church loomed behind her, a sanctuary turned battlefield, and she knew this wasn't Travis, cuffed and gone, but Carl's shadow, or worse, a new player striking from the dark. The crowd thinned to 500, their cheers silenced by fear, and she stood refusing a stretcher, her eyes burning with defiance as the sniper vanished, the rooftops empty. Patrice leaned against the car, the bandage tight, her shoulder throbbing, the radio's whisper looping in her mind. She'd taken Travis down, freed the hostages, thought she'd crushed them all, but this, a bullet from nowhere, was a strike beyond his reach, a promise of deadlier foes. The precinct buzzed in her thoughts, a fortress she'd reclaimed. Now a target again, and she saw the pattern. Every win birthed a worse blow, relentless, unyielding. She'd fought with fists, with proof, with crowds, but this was a ghost, a shadow she couldn't punch. The video hit 2,100,000, her blood a stark image online, and she straightened, wiping sweat from her brow, the dawn's light harsh on her wounds. They'd taken her home, her niece, her peace, and now they aimed to take her life. She muttered to Lena, "Find that shooter," her voice a vow, and turned to the fight she couldn't flee, a war with no end in sight. Patrice Coleman sat in the precinct's command room, the morning sun slicing through blinds at 7 a.m., her shoulder throbbing under a fresh bandage, the sniper's graze a dull ache she ignored. The video had hit 2,200,000 views, the church standoff trending, her blood-streaked image a rallying cry. But that radio whisper, "Next time, headshot," gnawed at her. She'd called Lena at 6:45, her voice a steel thread through the pain. "Set a trap for Carl, he's behind the sniper. Use his bail." Lena nodded, her eyes sharp, and by 7:15 they'd rigged a sting, a fake informant, a burner phone, and a meet at a derelict pier off the river. Patrice stood, her suit swapped for a tactical vest, and led the op herself, 6 officers in tow, their boots silent on the precinct floor as they rolled out. The air buzzed with her command, the sniper's threat a fuel she'd turned back on Carl Vance, a man she'd bury today. They hit the pier at 8, the water lapping against rotting wood, the informant, a wiry undercover named Jace, waiting, in a hoodie wired with a mic. Carl arrived at 8:15, out on bail from the bomb charge, his bald head gleaming under a cap, his gait cocky despite the cuffs he'd worn hours ago. He'd bitten the bait, a promise of sniper intel too juicy to resist, and Patrice watched from a van 50 yards off, her pulse steady as Jace played his part. "Got your shooter's name," Jace muttered, slipping Carl a note, and Carl snatched it, his voice a rasp through the mic. "Good. That bitch dies today. Hired him for 10 grand. Patrice's fist clenched, the confession crackling in her earpiece, and she signaled the team, "Go!" They swarmed, guns drawn, Carl's hands shooting up as he snarled, "Set up!" Cops tackled him, cuffs snapping, and she stepped out, her eyes locked on his, her voice ice. "Life sentence, Carl, enjoy it." The pier stank of fish and defeat, the video hitting 2,300,000 as Maya's live feed caught the bust. Vance caught trending. Back at the precinct by 9, Patrice pored over Carl's phone, seized in the sting. It's logs a goldmine, 10 officers linked to his payroll, names matching her audit list, their texts a trail of slurs and threats. She called Lena at 9:15, her tone unyielding. "Fire them, all 10, now." Lena executed it by 10, badges. Yanked, lockers emptied. The precinct a hive of shock as the traitors were marched out, their protests drowned by the clang of doors. The video surged to 2,400,000, the purge trending, and she stood in the lobby, the bomb scars still raw, addressing the rest. "You're with me or you're gone," she said, her voice a hammer, and the room saluted, fear turning to loyalty under her glare. She'd trapped Carl, gutted his crew, thought she'd won, her shoulders sting a badge of her fight. The city buzzed with her name, a chant of triumph she could feel, a fortress reclaimed from the rot. That triumph peaked at noon, when Jacksonville threw a parade in her honor, the streets alive with 2,000 souls, their cheers a roar as she rode in an open car, Jamal and Keisha beside her, their smiles a balm to her wounds. The sun blazed, banners flapping, "Chief Coleman, our hero," and the video hit 2,500,000. Parade for Patrice trending as horns blared, confetti raining down. She waved, her vest swapped for a crisp blazer. The sniper's threat a shadow she'd banished, Carl's life sentence a lock she'd turned herself. The crowd swelled to 2,500, their phones filming, and she felt invincible, the precinct's loyalty a shield, her reform bill. Law by morning. Travis was cuffed, Carl was done, Grayson a ghost. She'd crushed them all, hadn't she? The car rolled past City Hall, the river glinting, and she leaned back, the weight gone, a victory so bright it blinded her to the cracks. Those cracks split open at 12:30, when a squad car screeched up. 4 officers, loyal, she'd thought, leaping out mid-parade, their guns drawn, faces hard as they cuffed her wrists, the metal cold against her skin. The crowd gasped. Phones wobbling, the video rocketing to 2,600,000 as chief arrested trended. A city stunned silent. "You're a threat to stability," one barked, his voice a snarl, and she recognized him. Officer Pike, a late. Haunted name she'd missed, his eyes glinting with a hate she'd underestimated. Jamal shouted, "Let her go." But they shoved her into the car, Keisha's cries piercing the air as the parade froze, confetti settling in a surreal haze. She sat in the back seat, her shoulder throbbing, the cuffs biting, and pieced it. Leaked memo emailed to Lena at 12:15 claimed Grayson had sold her out to Governor Tate, a racist relic who'd declared a state emergency, targeting black neighborhoods with troops, pinning it on her chaos. The precinct had turned, Pike's crew a sleeper cell, and her triumph was a trap. The car sped to the station, the crowd thinning to 1,000, their cheers souring to whispers as troops rolled in, camo-clad shadows locking down streets, the pie. Video hitting 2,700,000. A city split by betrayal. Patrice sat in a holding cell by one, the concrete cold, her blazer torn. The memo's text glowing on her phone before they'd seized it. Coleman's instability justifies action, Gov. Tate. She'd trapped Carl, fired 10, thought she'd won. But this, a governor's coup, her own men turning, was a strike beyond Travis, beyond Carl, a systemic claw she'd barely scratched. The precinct loomed around her, a cage now, its scars mocking her, and she saw the pattern. Every victory birthed a worse beast, this one cloaked in law. She banged the bars, her voice a roar, "Lena, get me out!" But silence answered, the troops' boots echoing outside, a war she'd fought to stop now swallowing her whole. Patrice Coleman sat in a stark Jacksonville courtroom, the clock ticking past 2 p.m., her wrists chafed from cuffs that still lingered in memory, though they'd been removed for this hearing. The room buzzed with tension, 100 eyes, reporters, cops, citizens, boring into her as she faced trumped-up treason charges, a grotesque gift from Governor Tate's state emergency. The video had soared to 2,800,000 views, her mid-parade arrest trending, a city split between outrage and fear as troops patrolled black neighborhoods, their boots a drumbeat of oppression she'd fought to stop. She wore a borrowed blazer, her shoulder bandage peeking through, the sniper's graze a dull throb as she stared at the judge, a stern woman named Hargrove with silver hair and a gaze like flint. The prosecution, a slick attorney named Vickers, paced, his voice a venomous drawl. Coleman's actions, raids, purges, chaos, threaten stability. She's a traitor to this state. Her legacy teetered, a tightrope over a pit she'd clawed out of, and she felt the weight of every blow. Travis's spit, Carl's bomb, the mob's fire, piling on this final stake. Travis Malone slouched in the witness box at 2:15, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the uniform he'd once flaunted, his smirk intact despite the cuffs from the church standoff. Vickers called him first, a pawn in Tate's game, and he leaned into the mic, his voice a gravelly taunt. "She framed me, pushed me out, turned the city against good cops. That bomb, the fire, all her doing to look like a hero." The lie slithered through the room, gasps rippling. The video hitting 2,900,000 as live streams caught his grin, a city watching a ghost of her war testify. Patrice's jaw tightened, her fists clenching under the table, but she stayed silent, her eyes flicking to Maya Torres in the gallery, her friend's face pale but resolute. She'd slipped Maya a burner phone at 1:45, smuggled via Lena during a jailhouse visit, a last gambit she'd whispered in the dark. "Hack Tate, find the truth." Now she waited. The clock a guillotine, Travis's words a noose she couldn't dodge yet. Vickers strutted, piling on, his evidence a sham, doctored logs claiming she'd ordered the bomb, forged memos linking her to Carl's mob. But the jury, 8 white faces and 4 black, shifted uneasily, doubt creeping in. Hargrove banged her gavel at 2:30, silencing murmurs, her voice sharp. "Defense, your turn." Patrice's lawyer, a grizzled ex-cop named Rawls, stood, his limp a badge from his own battles, and called no witnesses, a move that drew gasps. She nodded at him, her signal clear, and he sat, leaving the room hanging, Vickers smirking like he'd won. Then at 2:40, Maya slipped her the burner under the table, its screen glowing with a file hacked from Tate's private server, a recording time-stamped 3 days ago. Patrice stood, her voice cutting through the hush. "Your Honor, play this." Hargrove's eyes narrowed, but she nodded, the clerk plugging it in, and Tate's voice boomed, oily and smug. "Coleman's a problem. Frame her for treason. Lock her up. Keep the niggers in line." The room erupted, jurors gasping, Vickers paling as the video hit 3 million, as Tate exposed trending. Hargrove slammed her gavel, her face a storm, and turned to Vickers, her voice ice. "Explain this." He stammered, sweat beading, but the damage was done, the jury's eyes blazing with fury as Patrice stood taller, her shoulders pain a distant echo. She spoke, her tone a blade. "That's the real traitor. He used Travis. Carl, the mob, all to crush me, to crush us." The gallery roared, 50 voices shouting, "Free her!" And Hargrove didn't hesitate, her ruling swift at 3. Charges dismissed, Coleman's cleared, Tate's under investigation. The cuffs stayed off, the courtroom doors flung open, and Patrice walked out, the sun blinding, the crowd outside swelling to 2,000, their cheers a tidal wave as troops retreated, their emergency crumbling under Tate's own words. The E. Video hit 3,100,000. Maya's stream at 200,000 live, a city reclaiming its chief, her badge a beacon she'd wrested back from the abyss. She stood on the courthouse steps at 3:15, Jamal and Keisha rushing her, their hugs a lifeline as the crowd chanted, "Chief! Chief!" Lena flanked her, grinning, the precinct hers again, its rot purged by her hand. The reform bill stood. The 10 fired, Carl jailed for life, Travis a shell she'd won, a victory forged in blood and fire, her legacy a flame they couldn't douse. The video surged to 3,200,000, her name a hymn across Jacksonville, and she breathed deep, the river glinting beyond, a moment of peace she'd earned. Tate's fall was breaking news by 3:30, his mansion raided, his career ash, and she felt the weight lift, the war's end a dawn she'd fought to see. She'd faced spit, bombs, mobs, bullets, and won, hadn't she? The crowd thinned to 1,500, their phones down, their faith hers, and she turned to go, the precinct calling, a fortress she'd rebuilt. That peace shattered at 11 p.m. when she sat in her office, the slur-carved desk a trophy, the city quiet under a moonless sky. The video hit 3,300,000, her triumph trending. But a shadow moved, a figure in her doorway, silent as death. She looked up, her pulse spiking, and a voice whispered, low and cold, "You didn't catch us all." A glint of steel flashing as a knife arced toward her. The lights cut out, a plunge into black, her scream swallowed by the dark as the blade stopped inches from her throat, a hand yanking it back, the shadow vanishing into the hall. She leapt up, her chair crashing, and grabbed her gun, firing blind. The shots echoing, but the figure was gone, a ghost she couldn't name. The precinct hummed oblivious, and she stood, breath ragged, the knife's edge a promise of a foe beyond Travis, beyond Carl, beyond Tate, a cabal untouched, waiting. The video's echo faded, her victory a hollow shell, and she knew this war wasn't over, a cliffhanger carved in the dark. The journey of Patrice Coleman in this gripping tale reveals profound truths about resilience, justice, and the unyielding fight against systemic racism. One key lesson is the power of persistence. Patrice faced relentless attacks, spit, vandalism, arson, a bombing, even betrayal, yet she never surrendered. Each blow tested her, but her refusal to break turned every setback into a stepping stone, showing that strength isn't just physical, but a fire in the soul. Another takeaway is the cost of challenging power. Her victories, exposing Travis, jailing Carl, toppling Tate, came with escalating retaliation, from personal losses like her home to public threats like the sniper, proving that dismantling injustice often demands sacrifice. The story also underscores the importance of allies. Maya's journalism, Lena's loyalty, and the community's marches were lifelines, highlighting that no one wins alone against a rigged system. Finally, the chilling twist, that a shadow remains, teaches us that evil adapts, lurking beyond each triumph, urging vigilance even in victory. Patrice's saga isn't just a tale, it's a mirror to our world, where racism's roots run deep and cutting them takes more than one swing. Her story inspires us to stand firm, speak truth, and lean on each other, even when the fight feels endless. So what's the takeaway for you? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Did Patrice's grit change how you see justice? Hit like if her battle stirred you. Subscribe to catch more stories of defiance and share if you believe in fighting back. Thanks for joining this wild ride. Here's to courage that outlasts the dark. And may you find your own strength to rise against the odds.